high school down there. Excuse me. And graduated 7 years later from the University of Oregon. Like Keith said, with a degree in geography and Spanish, and I know a lot more about geography than, than I know about Spanish, and that's probably why I've never been asked to speak to a group of experts in Romance languages, so here I am talking to geographers. So I got this bachelor's degree with in geography and whatnot, and I did 2 internships at the end of my education, one for the BLM as a forestry technician, the other one as a cartographic technician for the Forest Service. And I learned from being a forestry technician, those people work out in the rain. and they oftentimes have to go up and down muddy hills and work when it's windy and things are falling out of the trees. And it was very arduous. And I have always liked to hike as much as the next person, but this took it to a new level, and so I decided I want to be a map maker and work indoors and enjoy the outdoors, as recreation. So I thought, well, maybe I'll get a job at the Forest Service or something like that. But I didn't have a degree in cartography, which was required, or a couple of years of experience in the field of cartography. So they couldn't hire me. I ostensibly didn't know enough about cartography to do that sort of thing. But absolutely no hard feelings. So, but I was devastated. But gathered myself together and connected with a gentleman named Bert Lowry, who distributed maps, street maps and road maps throughout Oregon. And I told him that I would love it if I could go to work for him, selling maps. And Bert, a very gracious gentleman, he said, well, I've got my sales stuff all covered, but I could really use somebody that can make maps. And so I thought back to my cartography classes at the U of O and the training I'd gotten, and I thought, well, I can make a street map. And so the very first map that I made was a street map of, see if anybody can identify. Help! Oh. Okay. Thank you. So, I'll just tell you, this is a detail from the first map I made. It's Roseburg, Oregon. It was made using the techniques I had learned at the University of Oregon, drafting pen and ink on mylar and using straight edges and curves and zipatone patterns and stuff. And this baby was hand lettered using one of these. I mean, is anybody else here acquainted with these things? Very a few more. A few years ago, I was at the Brownsville Historic Museum, and with my cousin, and they had an exhibit of old drafting tools, and dang it, I knew how to use every one. Man, there were railroad pins and all that stuff, and it just made me feel old. But so I made a map of Roseburg, and a couple years later, my techniques had improved, and I was scribing and using peel coats and pasted up type and stuff like that. And I got a contract making maps for Rand McNally. And I did all the Portland suburbs in Vancouver as well, and made a map of Medford for him and some other stuff. And by this time, I think my work was getting pretty decent. You can see real tidy interchanges and things like that, but still I had some things to learn about type placement. I was still stacking type and stuff like that is the type of thing that I avoid these days. So I made all this this money making maps under contract for Rand McNally, and I had employees and stuff, and it was hell. Not because Rand McNally was difficult to work with, but because having employees just didn't work for me. So I made enough money that I took 2 years off of work and just basically went in a couple of times a week and checked my phone machine to see what was going on. I maintained an office and stuff like that. But when I came back to work, after taking 2 years off, in which I learned to backpack and cross-country and downhill ski and ride a bike, went on a big backpack trip. I hiked the PCT through Oregon and stuff like that. So when I came back to work, Rand McNally offered me a big contract making this program-based, mapping all of Portland basically, for an atlas I think that they were planning to put together. And I just wasn't interested in doing that anymore. I felt I had paid my dues, and street maps are, there's a lot of data to deal with. So my first map back is this self-published map. This is a detail from my Willamette Pass cross-country ski trail map. And this is my first map that won a national award. It was selected best thematic map for the year that was published, which was like 89 or something like that. And honestly, I thought there had been some sort of mistake. I mean, I was just this guy working out in Oregon, making maps, and I didn't really understand that I was a serious cartographer even, but this helped me understand that I was a serious cartographer. And I did a survey at this time of American-made maps, and it was my first inkling that, maybe American cartographers don't take things as seriously as they could, because I'd become familiar with Swiss cartography and French and British and Japanese and all that going to school, and I could see that American cartography was really not approaching the artistry of cartography from those countries. So a few years later, my technique is continuing to improve, and I'm learning how to use an airbrush to make shaded relief and all that. And I wanted to make a map of the Wallowa Mountains. I decided to make this map when I was standing on top of Eagle Cap with some friends, and I had the Forest Service map of the Eagle Cap Wilderness. And it was virtually useless to help me understand what I was seeing. The contours were so tiny and close together, and the index contour numbers were so small they couldn't be read. The map did not show land cover; it showed land ownership, which doesn't really do justice to the Wallowa Mountains. It was just this dark green thing, and so I decided to make a map of the Wallowa Mountains. And before I did that, I studied Swiss cartography. I bought all the 100,000 quadrangles made by the Swiss Topographic Office of Switzerland, and it only takes 16 of them. I wonder how many it takes to do the United States. But anyway, I studied them. How do they do? How do they do this? How do they do that? How do they take place type relative to points? What's their contour interval, and why do they choose that? And I decided that I could do pretty much everything the Swiss cartographers could do, except rock illustrations. I knew that if I attempted those, I'd just make a mess out of them, because that's serious illustration that I'm sure takes years to learn and perfect and be able to create presentable work. And this is a enlargement from my Wallowa Mountains map, and I really love this image because contours and shaded relief have the power. They sort of multiply each other's ability to create an impression of 3 dimensions. So I don't know if it works projected like this, but the image I'm looking at looks quite 3-dimensional, and it looks like you could hurt yourself if you fell down on it. And that image is from this map of the Wallowa Mountains, which was my first map selected for top national honors. And and then this is what it looks like if you scan a handmade map and put it in Photoshop and take a look at it from an angle. And I'm sure there's a lot more sophisticated ways of accomplishing this, but it does a pretty decent job of making a reasonably deep-looking and a map that captures some of the qualities of the Wallowa Mountains. So anyway, this is a novelty to still a novelty to me. Like, after all these years of cartography, I'm finally learning how to use Photoshop. Next map up, state of Oregon. This is my last handmade map. And here's a detail from it, Steens Mountain. It's still all made by hand. Shaded relief was created with airbrush and colored pencils. And the shaded relief on this alone took 600 hours of time. And I really never got tired of anything that I was ever working on except for the shaded relief for this map. 600 hours doing exactly the same thing. Wow. At this time, by now it's like 1998 or something like that, and manual cartography is becoming a thing of the past, and you couldn't buy the scribe coats and stuff that I used anymore. But I had met up with Pat Dunley of Williamstown, Massachusetts, and we exchanged maps and liked each other's work, and we decided we'd collaborate. And we started with a map of the Bull of the Woods and Opal Creek wilderness areas, and it didn't turn out so great. I mean, it's got a lot of great information on it, but we kind of keep it hidden. But the next map, the Wallowa Mountain, or not the Wallowa Mountains, but Chugach State Park, Alaska, we designed after the Wallowa Mountains map that you saw a second ago. And lo and behold, this map also received the highest honor for cartography in North America. I was getting to think, I was starting to get kind of a big hit or something, or just expected that I'd always win, but, you know, good things never last. So I lost quite a few of them, too. And here's a detail from it. You know, this is just, I don't know, 25 miles out of Anchorage, this, you know, alpine wilderness park. And decided to make it when I was up there, discovered Chugach State Park, and nobody had ever made a map. You know, 250,000 people living next to this recreation area where a lot of people like to go, but nobody ever mapped it, so I did. And Turnagain Arms visible at the bottom, and you can see the beautiful terrain and stuff, and Girdwood, the fancy ski area. It's right here. And then, so, I'm an artist, but I'm practical, and I had established a distribution network for selling the Chugach State Park map, and it was being pretty successful, and so I decided, well, the most logical thing to do now is to make a map of the whole state of Alaska. And so Pat and I collaborated on this, and once again, we designed it 50-50. This was a complete 50-50 proposition, design and everything. And I swear to you, moments before we sent the files off to the electronic files off to Williams and Heinz, the printer, back in Maryland, Pat and I were still, I hate to use the word, but it's true, we were arguing about what kind of map we had made. We'd spent 3 years making this map, and we still didn't agree what kind of map it was. He wanted it to be a landform map because he thought landform maps were more appealing, and I wanted it to be a travel map because I've been making and selling travel maps for a number of years, and I figured that's what people pay for. They're paying for all those lines and all those type labels, and the mountains will. The depiction of mountains and land cover will certainly enhance their visit to Alaska and their understanding of the geography, but I didn't think people would pay for it. So I finally won out. The last minute, Pat lightens up the files and sends them off, and we get it printed. So the next map, this is the Sierra Nevada, down in California and Nevada. And this is the first map that I made that was made digitally and was totally my creation. Pat did all the GIS stuff and created the shaded relief, and I guess that's considered GIS. But and then I did a lot of enhancing of the shaded relief and redrafted the map and put all the type labels on it. Here's a detail from Yosemite National Park to show you that, you know, unlike this Alaska map, check this out. Look at all those type labels. Can you believe it? You know, it's, but, what's that?
Like National Geographic.
Oh. Well, I'm not sure I like that. But this was more of a return for me to artistic cartography. So you can see when you open it up, there's not a jillion type labels. Of course, there's not a lot of towns in Yosemite National Park. And because this is still a novelty, I had to do one of these too. So there you go. The Oregon map that I had made by hand was out of print. I wanted to have a map of Oregon because it's my home, and and I love the geography of Oregon, being immersed in it and all that. So I wanted to make another one. I made this map of the state of Oregon, and you know, I guess I have failed to mention that none of these last three maps that I've shown you won any big national awards. They got some honorable mentions and things. Anyway, here's the same detail of Steen's Mountain done digitally, and this allows us to compare the two. The shaded relief done by hand right here and the digital. And to me, the digital wins out. You know, they both have strengths and weaknesses, but the digital shaded relief has more strengths and fewer weaknesses. So, and putting this together gave me an idea of how to manually smooth digital shaded relief to have a result that's perhaps better than we've ever seen for either totally manual or totally digital shading. So, Pat and I were going to make a map of the Colorado Rockies, and we were totally excited about it. You know, it's going to be another beautiful map, maybe learn from the mistakes on the Sierra Nevada map and make a really cool map of the Colorado Rockies. And I got to thinking, you know, I've been doing this for 25 years. It's been a lot of fun, but I'm not making any sort of a living, really, and I needed to make something that had a broader market. So I took a look at all the existing maps of the United States, the Rand McNally, Michelin, National Geographic, and all that. Studied the graphics and the content, and figured that I could do better work than that. So I made this the Essential Geography of the United States of America, and then this is really my last big work, and it's not my final one, I hope, but the most recent one. And you know, this one got an award too, so that was quite gratifying because I put everything I had into this map. You know, every bit of artistic and geographic understanding I could conjure. It took everything I knew about map making to do it. I had a geographic editor, I had an artistic editor. We talked about this endlessly about the graphics and what geography is, and on and on. And so this is totally my magnum opus right here. And so this is kind of cutesy and dumb, but I did this. Details of our local area from the Essential Geography map. So since then, and the Essential Geography is like 3.5 years old now. I have learned that artists oftentimes spend as much or more time getting their work out into the world than they spend creating their works. So that's basically what I've been doing. The work is so far from being thoroughly marketed that it boggles my mind that things haven't happened more quickly. I have had success with it, but there's just so much more that you can do with a map like this that I haven't been able to do. But I've done a lot of Facebook posts. I've got an Essential Geography Facebook page, and a lot of them are thematic maps for this post that I call Rediscover the USA. So I developed an appreciation for creating thematic maps, and I made this map of the Missouri floods. And it's reminiscent of what it may have looked like. You know, water's blue, ice is white, that sort of thing. And I've also started to market my maps as wall art. Right now, this image is printed on canvas and is available. It's hanging in a gallery down in Eugene. This map of this vignette, a portrait of Michigan, is one of my art pieces too, as is Montana. And states don't have to have Great Lakes or Rocky Mountains to be beautiful. I think this portrait of Iowa is beautiful, nestled between the two great rivers and with a drainage pattern that goes diagonally across the state, and all these great iconic names like Council Bluffs and Des Moines and stuff. This is, even Iowa, there's nothing dramatic really happening there, but it's still a beautiful geographic representation. So I've made all these maps. I've been doing this for 31 years, and what have I learned from all that? Well, one of the things that I've learned from 31 years of map making is that in North America, the general reference map genre has been completely completely overlooked and unexplored as a serious educational tool, which is too bad because general reference maps are the basic tool for gaining a functional understanding of the land. In other words, general maps that inform deeply and clearly are the basic tool for becoming functionally literate in geography. And I believe the absence of this type of map contributes to geographic illiteracy in the United States. It's as if it had never occurred to anybody to make a road map so that people could easily navigate, you know. And if it had never occurred to anybody to make a road map, today it would be much more difficult to go from place to place. And we might not know why it's so difficult, but it would be because nobody created these aids to navigation called transportation maps. In fact, in North America, it had never occurred to anyone to create functional general maps so people could understand basic geography easily. And as a result, in America, it is more challenging today than it should be to become geographically literate. And I believe that the reason geography has never been part of popular American culture is that it is so difficult in the United States to become geographically literate. Other countries, you know, one of my favorite maps is a general map of Switzerland. You know, it's this beautiful work of art. It clarifies where things are there like nobody's business. So for, you know, more than 100 years, there's been transportation maps like this. They started out as railroad maps that would help promote rail travel 150 years ago or something like this, and eventually became street maps like this, and now they look like that. And these are great maps. They function for navigation. And we've had thematic maps, of course, in reports and atlases and in all kinds of places, and there's an infinite number of really great thematic maps made. And physical maps. We've always had physical maps of, you know, biogeography and hydrography, and this is a really wonderful landform map by Raven Maps down in Medford. And even though it beautifully depicts the landforms, it doesn't really do justice to any other of the layers of geography. And we've also had political maps like this map by National Geographic with the richly or brightly colored state boundaries, which really are helpful for allowing school children to memorize where the states are and what their shapes are, but it doesn't do justice to anything other than that. And I believe it's time. That sounds kind of corny, but I think there's room for cartography to take things farther than just a map that shows state boundaries and where things are. The thing we've never had are general maps like this, and maps that illustrate the basic patterns of water, landforms, land cover and settlement, nomenclature, transportation, and landmarks. We've never had functional general maps, and the essential geography of the United States of America is the only general map of the United States. Now, National Geographic does publish a series of state maps that could fall in or do fall in the category of general maps, but they don't really tell us a great deal about the geography. For example, what's the elevation of the low areas here? We've got some summits identified with elevations, but how about those reservoirs up in the north? And what's the elevation of Vancouver and Battleground and perhaps Woodland? We've got some state parks on here, but where's the Columbia River Gorge National Scenic Area? And around, is it urbanized around Vancouver? Is it just a crossroads, like maybe Cherry Grove is, or is it urbanized there and rural out around Battleground, Cherry Grove, and Dollar Corner and all that? They're not telling you that basic geography. And then I don't know whose decision it was to not include Portland on a geography map of the state of Washington, but I can almost guarantee you it was not a geographer, because a geographer would know that a lot of people in Vancouver work in Portland And the geographer would not want this map hanging on a wall in somebody's home in Vancouver, and one of the kids says, "Hey, Mommy, can you show me where you go to work every day?" "No, honey, I can't." Because it's not on this map. And that's just one of the reasons why it's important to go beyond the area of interest. Because who knows where the area of interest really stops. But anyway, I don't consider this to be a serious educational tool for geography. Here's the same area from my most recent map of the state of Oregon, and this is how I treat Washington. So you can see urbanized areas. You can see some elevations of places and reservoirs, and you can't really see land cover here, but you've got the Columbia River Gorge National Scenic Area and all those things. So, but this map's got really heavy road network coverage, so you can't really use this as a geography map. All that stuff's there. It's secondary. Geography's secondary on this map to transportation. So what exactly is a general map, and what do general maps do? A general reference map is an illustration of basic geography. It's just that simple. And we've never had illustrations in this country of basic geography. One of the purposes of general maps is to make it easy for the average user to see watercourses. So the watercourses on my map are easy to see. General maps make it easy to see the shape of the land and the elevations of the land, not just the elevation of a mountain peak, but the elevation of places like Salt Lake City and Park City, so that the map user who's not familiar with Utah can look at this map and see that, yeah, there's almost 3,000 feet of elevation difference between Park City and Salt Lake City, therefore it must look a lot different there. And it does. The climate's different, the vegetation is different. So elevation is a basic element of geography and is found on a general map. General maps faithfully depict settlement patterns and primary transportation routes. A general map clearly illustrates basic land cover and has a well-defined hierarchy of type. And each type character on a general map is placed precisely where it will make the greatest contribution to the communication, to the overall communication. General maps help the user see specific elements of geography, like the continental divide, time zone boundaries, which are represented here with the T's that wander this way and that way along the Salmon River. A general map makes it obvious that a state like Oregon is not completely forested, which is something that not everybody in the United States knows. We know that, but talk to somebody back east, they think Oregon's just completely covered with Douglas fir trees, and it's not. By the same token, a lot of people in Oregon think that, or maybe they don't even think about it, but don't know that North Carolina is a forested state, and it is. And general maps help people understand basic geography like that. A general map can have iconic cultural landmarks. On the essential geography, I put Route 66, and you can follow it from Chicago to LA. And it's fun. It's like you're traveling. The general map, at least this one, makes it clear what's the state high point of each of the states. And so here you see Mount Rainier with this high elevation. Right away, well, that's the state high point. And Washington starts at sea level, so there's a lot of relief here. And then another thing that happens on a map like this is you see Mount Rainier is rising above forested mountains that surround it. It's in a national park. It's the headwaters of the Cowlitz River. There's the Puget Sound and all that. Urban development is nearby. The PCT is nearby. And it's in the Cascade Range, and you can see all these things at a glance, and you get an idea of what Mount Rainier is like and what its environment is like. It's a national park and all that. So, to make general reference maps that help people see and understand basic geography, these maps must be made to a standard of expression that is currently basically missing in traditional North American cartography, but that is found in other fields, including botanical illustration. So to demonstrate my point, I'd like to introduce you to the work of Bend artist Jeannie Divins, who painted this Douglas fir cone. Here we see Jeannie working on one of her pieces, and notice the fine brush and the magnifying lenses which she uses to control each detail of what she's creating. She's not starting with data and combing it out and getting the best results she can that way. She's starting with a blank canvas or a piece of paper and creating and controlling every detail of her painting. So what's her training? What's the training of somebody who can do art to this level right here? Well, in 1986, Jeannie Divins earned a PhD from the Department of Botany and Plant Pathology at Oregon State University. She knows plants. Since then, she has received a diploma as a botanical illustrator from the English Gardening School in London. So she knows a ton about plants, and she got some training from experts on how to render visually the stuff that she knows. To Jeannie, botanical illustration is a meditation that, if you're fortunate, will result in plant portraiture that captures the magic of its subject. And, when I first read that, I thought, wow, that's exactly what I wish I had said about map making. So here's a close-up of Jeannie's Douglas fir cone. So what has she done here to make this thing so identifiable as a Douglas fir cone? Well, the first thing that I see is that Jeannie has utilized the full range of light, which is what artists do. If you've ever studied Rembrandt paintings, gone up to him and taken a really close look, he puts one little teeny brush stroke of white on his map, and then he uses 6 gallons of black paint around the outside. But he uses the full range of light, and I one time in the National Gallery of Art in Washington, I did the docent's tour, whatever you call it, looking at all the blue ribbon pieces, and sure enough, they all use the full range of light. So you can see we go to black here, or pretty much the solid dark color, but it doesn't interfere with the impression of curvature of the scale here. And in places you can see where Jeannie has gone to pure white, but not over big areas, so that it looks flat. So she's utilized the full range of light. Something else that she's done is she's painted this thing in 3 different colors. One color up here. This is what these cones look like when they first fall out of the tree. Down here's what they look like that have been sitting out in the sun all summer. And down here's what they look like if they've been sitting under the tree wet all winter, and you can get some algae growing on it. So as a botanical illustrator and a trained botanist, she knows these things and incorporates them into her artwork. So somebody has the best chance possible of using her illustrations to identify what these things are. The last thing I'll point out that she did is, you see these white edges on these scales? Well, nature didn't put those there, the artist did. Those aren't really there. And at the size that this map is meant to be viewed, these will not even raise to the level of consciousness. Your eye will use them to see one scale from another, but your mind won't say, whoa, look at those white edges, and where's the white edges on the Douglas fir cone I'm holding, because you've got to get a magnifier out or blow this thing up on a screen just to see that stuff. So Jeannie's philosophy about botanical illustration is very familiar to me, because as I'm a cartographer to whom mapping is a meditation. When I'm mapping, I totally lose track of time, and I hope that what I do captures the magic of geography. And so, an example of the geography that I love to capture in my work, if you focus just on the blue drainage features here, you can see that the Allegheny and Monongahela rivers come together in downtown Pittsburgh to form the Ohio. And that's basic geography that these old style maps don't in no way make it possible to see. You could study this map with a magnifier and trace the Allegheny River, the Monongahela, and the Ohio, but when you have to study things that carefully, you lose track of what they're associated to. So here you get this picture of these two rivers coming together in an urban area and then forming a third river, which this map doesn't make that clear really at all. So I believe that if general maps are to successfully communicate basic geography, they need to be made to the same artistry that botanical illustrators use to paint plants. Artistry that is not currently the standard of educational wall maps in North America. So if these maps are going to illustrate geography as clearly as a botanical illustrator illustrates botany, well, there's some things we have to do. Number one, proper generalization or generalization that's in keeping with what we can reasonably expect people to perceive. This reservoir covers up on the map, or takes up this 1/3 of the space of the fingernail on my little finger, and there's only so much data that I feel like I've become familiar with this over these years. There's only so much data that people can deal with in a small area. There's no way in an area 1/3 the size of this fingernail that you can take in all this information, all this data. But this is how it comes to me, and then this is what I do with it. And one of the things I've learned is that a blue line needs to be about 6/1000ths of an inch wide in order for it to not get lost in everything else. And it wouldn't want to be any wider than that, because then it would start to interfere with things unnecessarily. Also, the lines need to be adequately spaced so they don't start pinching into two. And my rule of thumb is that there needs to be as much space between lines as the line weights themselves. Here's how the data came to me for the Mississippi River and what I did to it. The mind cannot possibly comprehend all these islands and backwaters and all the tiny meanders in these streams. And the most important thing is just to show this is the Mississippi River, this is its basic course, and here's some rivers that come into it. So I'm just simplifying things for people continuously. So if these maps are going to communicate basic geography, they need to do so with depth and clarity. Recently, like I think it was in the February issue of National Geographic, Garrison Keillor writes that the key to understanding the geography of Minneapolis-St. Paul is the Mississippi River. If you know where you are relative to the Mississippi, you know where you are in Minneapolis-St. Paul. So you can see I've kept as many type labels off of the Mississippi and Minnesota rivers as I could. And the old style maps made like by National Geographic don't really do that. This map also shows you that Minneapolis and St. Paul is one big urban area that straddles the Mississippi River, and that it's at the confluence of the Mississippi and Minnesota rivers. It shows you that the area is approximately 800 feet above sea level. This way you know that even though it's way inland from any coast, it's not like 5,000 feet elevation like Denver. It's under 1,000 feet, so the climate is different. This general map shows you that Minneapolis-St. Paul is where the boreal forests are thinning out into the corn and the soybean fields of southern Minnesota. And then it's got iconic landmarks on it that make Minneapolis-St. Paul what it is. The University of Minnesota, the Mall of America, the Fitzgerald Theater where Prairie Home Companion comes from, I thought were iconic ones. Also, a basic tenet of cartography is there should be nothing on the map that the average user cannot easily see. Well, these old style maps have all kinds of stuff on them that's not easy to see. It's not just the Mississippi River that you have a difficulty seeing here, but the Minneapolis-St. Paul Airport is underneath this capital B. And so you wouldn't even necessarily know it was on the map unless you got a magnifying glass out and studied that capital B to see what was under it. But even if the capital B were not on side, that symbol is red and all the roads are red, and it would still be difficult to see. It would not stand out like this black against yellow and red. So, we looked at Steen's Mountain before. Here's a view of it from the Essential Geography and National Geographic's map. And this is a 5,000-foot escarpment. And it shows up, it sort of looks like that. But on National Geographic's map, they've labeled it, but they didn't shade it. And that's like geographic crazy making. You look at that and see, oh, there's a mountain, but where's the mountain? I don't know. So I don't. It really troubles me that this National Geographic is our geographic leadership, and if they don't take geography much any more seriously than this, then how can we expect to be a geographically aware and concerned people? Here we're back to watercourses. I mean, at a glance, you can see the Bitterroot and the Clark Fork and things on this, but National Geographic's map, it kind of makes it hard to see the river going in and out of I-90, and so I want to emphasize the visibility of water features. I don't know why. And it's not digital cartography that's caused this. It's been going on forever. It's where it's extra work to set rivers back from roadways so you can see them both. But it's so valuable because if you can't really follow a drainage or see a road or whatever, but it's there, there's image, it's contributing image, but that image isn't saying anything, and that's just noise that you don't want on your map. So there should be no noise on a general map, and there should be nothing that doesn't contribute to the communication. And on these maps, on general maps, where a line like the line of longitude might run through a piece of type, we break it. Because we want to make that piece of type as easy to read as possible. Keep in mind, these are tiny little things. This is like 7.5 point type, or 6 point type. It's little. And so you put space around it. You do everything so somebody can read Bitterroot. And when you pay attention to detail like that, of which there's at least 100,000 individually identified bits of detail on a map, and you make sure that all those details are accessible to the eye, you've made a map that's easy for people to read, and it resonates with them. Another thing that a general map wants to do is make a unified presentation of all the types so that it flows together, not in ways that would create conflict, but in ways that are kind to the eye. Putting one type label running down and one or up and the next one running down, that's like visual. That's not nice. And I don't know why they would do that. When I'm talking like this, I'm not criticizing my cartographic colleagues at National Geographic. I've had an opportunity to meet a number of cartographers back there, and they're all people like me. They're conscientious. They want to do good work. But the people making these maps, honestly, what I've heard from friends working there is that they would like to be able to spend more time and make beautiful maps. So please don't make the mistake of thinking that I have no respect for my colleagues who are compelled to make these maps. General map, I believe it's necessary to recognize the existence of Native Americans. National Geographic's map doesn't even have the Navajo Nation on it, which is bigger than 8 states and has a culture that's unique in all of the world. And, they've got cool places like Paradise and Hot Springs and Ronan and Dixon, but are those more important than the Flathead Reservation? I say no. These reservations are gigantic contributors to our culture, our cultural mix, and they're only going to become more important. I predict like 50, 100 years from now, people are going to come from all over the world to visit these reservations where these people have these unique ways of life, unique dwellings, unique clothing and food and languages, and they're going to be interested in that because Native American culture doesn't exist like everywhere. It's here. And in addition to iconic things like national parks. How about iconic wilderness areas? There's probably not a backpacker in the United States who hasn't heard of the Bob Marshall Wilderness Area. So the Bob Marshall is important to one group of Americans. It's very important to them. And so, to me, it should be important to all Americans. A map like this isn't just trying to depict what I'm not pandering to one group or another. I'm trying to show everybody what's important to somebody. So I included like the Three Sisters Wilderness and the Eagle Cap Wilderness in Oregon. And getting back to geographic reliability or faithfulness or whatever you want to call it, the type labels on a general map for places should reflect the population density of the area. And I accomplished this by selecting just the principal cities and towns of an area to put on a map. One of the advantages to this is that this shows you what the principal towns of the Mississippi Delta happen to be. Cleveland, Indianola, Clarksdale, where the crossroads are. And this is where the blues came from. National Geographic's map has all those things on there, plus some other towns, but it doesn't allow you to see what are those main towns. Another problem with filling up spaces with type labels like this is that it makes a state like Mississippi appear to have the same population as Ohio, and Ohio's got like 3.5 times the population of Mississippi. So filling up empty space with type label, that's like disinformation coming from our national leadership in geography. A general map allows the user to distinguish one state from another by the unique geographic character of that state. Here we see that Mississippi is forested and a little bit hilly in places, and the Mississippi Delta is flat, and the Yazoo River, which is an important river in the region, is part of the mix. And the old style maps with the bright state boundaries, the most important clue they give you to distinguish one state from another is a brightly colored state boundary, which is not geography. It's sort of arbitrary. A general map should be reminiscent of the area that it's representing. I live north of Harrisburg, which is not on the map, but it's about here. And when I look out my window, what I see is flat farmland stretching out for a number of miles, and it's surrounded by forested mountains. And, anybody in New York City looking at this map knows what it's like around Harrisburg or in the Willamette Valley. So that's the goal with this map, and it may not be perfect in every place, but the goal is to make each spot, each place, each area on the map visually representative of reality. And this helps God, I just thought of something sort of mean to say, but this helps the map user understand that geography is the observation and understanding of the real world, and not a moonscape like these old style maps. That was a mean thing. So, if Americans are going to make gains in geographic literacy, and I think we all would agree that is a worthwhile thing, I believe we will need to have access to educational general maps that clearly and aesthetically illustrate basic geography. If we Americans are going to make gains in geographic literacy, we will need educational maps that are basically crafted to the same standard as this illustration of the Douglas fir cone painted by an artist down at the end. So anyway, thank you very much. Thank you.